So the Torah portion is Lech Lecha, which is about Avraham Avinu, Abraham, and the discussion of Rabbi Sacks is based on the story of Avraham and Lot. And this is a story of after Avraham returns from Egypt, he ends up, he's been traveling with Lot all along. Lot is his wife's, it's actually his wife's brother and it's his nephew, because it's Haran's child. Lot is Haran's child. So it's his brother-in-law and his nephew. And I didn't hear you. Hello? Someone say something? Okay. Let me mute everyone. So he's traveling together with him, and they both became wealthy. And it says the reason why Lot became wealthy was traveling with Avraham. Avraham became wealthy when Egypt made Avraham wealthy. They gave him presents. They wanted to appease him for abducting Sarah, his wife. And so it says that Avraham became wealthy, and he traveled back to Israel, and it says that Lot also became wealthy. Now, so what happened was that they weren't able to be in the same area because they both had animals, and there was some type of a argument between the shepherds, that the shepherds of Lot used to graze in other people's lands, and Abraham's shepherds would rebuke them and say, you're stealing. And what was their answer? They became very religious. They said, oh, God promised Abraham the land, and Abraham doesn't have any kids, so we're the inheritors. So it's all God promised the land to Abraham, and Abraham is going to get this land. He doesn't have any kids. So who's it going to go to? It's going to go to Lot. So they're relying on God's promise to Abraham that it's allowing them to go and take this land. Now, that logic is very crooked, because, first of all, God didn't give it to Abraham. He promised it to Abraham. And Abraham doesn't have kids, but he will have a kid, or he might have a kid, at least at this point. And even if he doesn't, who says that Lot is going to be the inheritor? Maybe he'll give it away. So the whole logic of his, but their claim that they're allowed to steal this land from whoever. So Abraham told Lot, he said, I don't want there to be a quarrel. And he said, after all, we're relatives. So he said, the whole land is before you. Choose which place you want. Let's separate. You separate from upon me. If you want to go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. And Lot, where did he choose to go? Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where Lot chose. He says, he saw this place that was well irrigated, and it was full of trees, full of vegetation, and the understanding is that he liked the way the people acted. Lot chose that place. The Medrash Rashi brings a Midrashic source that that he wanted that place because they acted inappropriately with regard to marital affairs and so on. And so Lot ended up going to that place. And so Lot chose for himself the entire Jordan plain. He journeyed from the east, and they separated from one another. So it looks at on this picture, I have a picture over here. It looks like this Jordan Plain is right below the Dead Sea. So this way they were separated. And that's the story. Now, Rabbi Sacks finds this this story. He finds something very interesting. He takes this verse: "If you will go left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." He says, "This is a quarrel over land." Abraham had become very wealthy in livestock, in silver and gold. Lot too accumulated a large entourage of servants, flocks, and herds, and ultimately there was a conflict. The land couldn't support them while they stayed together, and because their possessions was so great, quarrels broke out. And the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. I'm just thinking about that verse. Oh, the reason why it says that is because what it's mentioning that the Canaanite and the Perizzite were dwelling there at that time. What that's saying is that Abraham did not yet inherit this land, and it's hinting to us that Lot was claiming the land is his, and the verse is telling us, but it's not his, because even Abraham didn't get it yet. The Canaanite and the Perizzite were dwelling in the land at that time; it was still theirs. That's what the verse is saying. And Abraham said to Lot, "Let there not be a quarrel and between you and me, and let's part. And if you go left, I'll go to the right." So Lot, where did he choose? He chose this bad choice, this Jordan Valley. And what happens after they separate? So this is what the discussion of Rabbi Sacks is on. After they separate, Hashem says to Avraham, and after Lot had parted from him, in verse 14, it says, Hashem told to Avram, after Lot parted from him, lift up your eyes and see from the place that you are, to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, the whole land that you see, to you I am giving, and to your children forever. And I will place your children like the dust of the earth. I will give you that abundance of children. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth. If a man will be able to count the particles of dust in the world, then your offspring too will be countable. And go and walk through the land so that you'll feel like its owner. Walk through the land to its length, to its width, because to you I am giving it in the future. And it says Avram pitched his tent. He set up tents, and he came and dwelled in the place of Eloine Mamre, the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and he built over there a mizbeach, an altar. So, any questions on that? That's the portion. I didn't really add anything to it. But Rabbi Sacks says, look at what happened of the sequence of these events. Look at the
Rabbi.
Yeah.
I heard Rabbi Gordon explaining yesterday that if it belonged to Canaan, how did the Jews claim it? So he was saying that before Canaan conquered the land from Melchizedek, from Shalem. He was the king of Jerusalem, and he was the forerunner of Avram. So it really belonged to the Jews by being belonging to Melchizedek. How did Canaan get in there? They conquered them out. And then when the Jews came in, they conquered them out. But it originally belonged to the Jews before the Canaanites, via Melchizedek.
Well, the idea is that the flood killed everyone. And so there was only 4 people that it could have belonged to after the flood. And that's Noach or his 3 kids. And so what you're saying is that Shem was the official owner. And that's
I forgot
correct.
that part. I'm sorry, I forgot that part.
Yeah, no, so that's correct. But it's based on the story with the 4 kings and the 5 kings, which we'll soon read about, and how the Canaanite were trying to conquer it from Shem, and now Abraham got it back. But the actual gift to Abraham he didn't really get it until the Jewish people left Egypt. I mean, that's really the gift of the land. It's not like we really owned, until much later, till we went through Egypt. That's when we were really meant to conquer the land. We don't find that any division of the land earlier than that was constantly bought.
He had a future interest.
Thank you for the legal term, Isaac Shkoyach. So like any involvement with the land, they constantly bought. Abraham bought a plot for his wife Sarah, and Yaakov bought a place in Shem, and they were constantly buying pieces of land, even though Hashem is promising to give it to them. They didn't really get it. So, but okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's an interesting point. That it was originally Melchizedek Melech Sholem Hoitzi Lechem V'Yayin. It says he brought out bread and wine to give to Abraham, and that he was the official owner of Yerushalayim, is connected to that term, that it was Melech Sholem. Yerushalayim is from Melchizedek Melech Sholem. So in any event, Rabbi Sacks says, let's look at the sequence of this story. And he says,
Rabbi, can I just ask first?
Sure.
So Melchizedek was a descendant of Shem.
Well, he was Shem.
He was Shem. Oh, okay. So he was the oldest son of Noah, and he was our progenitor. Yeah.
If you look in Rashi says that Melchizedek is Shem ben Noach. He is Shem.
Oh, thank you.
So the discussion of Rabbi Sacks is about the sequence over here. He says, Hashem made a promise after this conflict, and he says, what is the logic of the divine promise then after the conflict and Abraham's resolution of it? What is at stake here is not a simple incident in the life of the first of the patriarchs, but something far more general and enduring. So the problem Rabbi Sacks has is Hashem, after this fight, Hashem tells Abraham that you're going to get the land. Now, it would seem that would have been great to discuss with Abraham if there was a fight going on. Now there's no more fight. Why is Hashem now telling him that he's going to give him, that the land will be, that you will have the land and so on, and the north, the south, the east, the west, I will give you, and to your offsprings, and walk through the land. Like Abraham already resolved the problem. So Rabbi Sacks says it is an utterly counterintuitive answer to the question of what do we own? So what do we really have in life? What's really ours? And it's a really interesting idea. What do you really think is yours? What do you consider your possession? Yes, Ben.
I think he's telling him now after they separated, because now he's on his own and he can tell him, you are the one that's getting this and this and that. And Lot has nothing to do with it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You mean it was good that light separated because now you'll be able to get it. The only thing is that the portion that light has, Abraham is going to own also.
Yes, but that's after it's destroyed.
Uh-huh. Right, but light wasn't destroyed.
Right.
If light left Israel, I think your explanation would be good. Because light left Israel, now Hashem tells Abraham, now you're all set. Your enemy is away. Now I can don't have to worry about him. No one's going to have any complaints. But
but
he's
not promising Lot anything. So Lot
at this point,
Lot is not getting it. Abraham is getting it now.
Right. But did he need him to leave?
He's going to live there. He's going to live there, but God didn't promise him anything.
Well, he did get Moav and Ammon.
Okay.
Light got Moav and Ammon.
Did he get it from God?
His kids, his daughter had, and it says that we're not supposed to fight with them and take their land because it was meant, Kilev ne light nasatiha Yerusha, it says, to the children of light, I have given that as an inheritance.
Okay, but that wasn't in Israel. It was outside Israel.
Right at the outs. Well, it's interesting because when Mashiach comes, it says that land is going to be part of our land. That we're going to have the Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni is going to be part of the 10 lands that are meant for us. That until then, it's only 7. And when Mashiach comes, we'll have the 10. And those are part of the lands. But in any event, it's a good thought. Maybe
Rabbi,
wanted him to leave. Yes,
Rabbi, Moab and Ammon, they are where present-day Jordan is?
Now, that's a good question. I'm not really so great at the geographics and of guessing.
I know that they weren't marrying the Ammonites and the Moabites. Right?
Let's think for a second. It's definitely on the east of Israel, the east of the Jordan River, and that's where we know Moab was where the story of Balak and Bilam happened, because that's the country of Moab that they were protecting, and Ammon is one of those countries also right there. Yeah. So it's going to be somewhere right along Jordan near. So if it's not Jordan, it's one of those countries. What's above Jordan? What country is that above Jordan?
Above Jordan is Syria.
Syria. And then Jordan, and what's below Jordan?
Below Jordan is Saudi Arabia, maybe.
Saudi Arabia.
It's west of it and below it. And then below that is Egypt.
Right.
No, Egypt is to the west.
In any event, it sounds like you might be right. It might be Jordan. Yeah. Yes, Susan. You're muted. You are muted. You're gonna have to press.
I'm sorry. I spent time on Kibbutz Chesliba, and I walked up a mount, not a mountain, but I walked up a large hill, and my brother told me right there is Jordan. Right there. And I said, how can the kibbutz be right at this close to Jordan? How dangerous it is. And my brother explained it's not dangerous because when they shoot the bombs can't, they go up, but they can't go straight down. So the kibbutz was protected by this kind of a semi-mountain, a large hill.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
And but I looked over the hill and all I saw was nothing. I didn't see soldiers or no Jordanians or anything. And my brother said, you never see anybody, that the people don't try to come over the hill and hurt anybody or do anything to the kibbutz.
Right. Nice personal experience. Thank you. Wow. That's interesting.
It was shocking. It was shocking to say the least.
Yeah. In any event, so we have this story of Abraham, and we have how after he resolves the problem with light, all of a sudden Hashem tells him now, that you should know that I'm going to be giving you to look to the right, to the east, to the west, the north, the south. It's going to be your land and to your children. And so why now is he giving? So Rabbi Sacks says this is going to teach us something about ownership. So Rabbi Sacks then brings the famous story of King Solomon. What's the most famous story of King Solomon? Everyone knows the famous story.
The baby.
Famous story.
The babies, the two women come
Splitting of the baby.
splitting of the baby. That's the most famous story. So the two women came complaining to King Solomon that this woman stole my baby, and she says, no, it's my baby, and the other one says, no, it's mine. And basically one of them had slept ended up suffocating the baby because she must have rolled over on top of the baby and suffocated the baby, and then switched babies with the other baby. And the woman says, this is not my baby, you switched it, you know, my baby is the one that you're holding. And so they both came before King Solomon, and King Solomon said that no problem, I'm going to have my servant cut the baby in half, and each of you will be able to take home half. And of course, only one of the mothers protested and said, let the child be given. And King Solomon said, of course, that's the right one. And let the child, the one who protested, the one who protested said, let her keep the child. King Solomon said, that's the real mother, and you get the child. And how did he know this? Because she was willing to give up the child rather than see it die. So what we see here is what you truly own is what you are willing to give up. And that's like a mind-boggling statement. What you really own is what you're willing to give up. I mean, who would have ever dreamed that that's what you really own? That's a very surprising thing to say. What you own is what you're willing to give up. But that's what Rabbi Sacks says is the meaning of the Torah in our parsha as well. That we'll soon see how the story of Abraham shows us why he really deserved to get the land of Israel. It's because what you're willing to give away, that's what you really deserve. That's what you really get. So Rabbi Sacks takes the example from all the tithings that we give to the poor and to the Kohanes. He says the firstborn animals, the first grain of the harvest, the first fruits of the crop. And actually, he talks about specifically the gifts to the Kohen. Yes, Isaac.
Just that it's not what you're willing to give away, but what you actually give away. Anything you do to somebody else is the only thing you own. Because what you do to yourself, you don't really own. It's goodbye. Right. You're going into the ground. But anything that you do, whether you want to call it a mitzvah, you want to call it whatever you want, or even that other people recognize what you've done. Not that you have to go even benatan l'chaveros, but the only thing that's yours is what you are willing to or actually gave away during your life, including koyach.
Including koyach, strength?
Koyach, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's very nice, Isaac.
So
nice.
Isaac, you're right, but I'll tell you why Rabbi Sacks uses the word willing to give away, because he wants to connect it to Abraham offering Lot any part of the land. So he was willing to give away any of it. So even though he didn't give it, because Lot only took one part, but So that's why I think he uses the word willing to give away. But your point is correct that
he was ultimately willing to give away Yitzchak also.
Right.
That was his highest level. Because I was giving away his future. It was not just giving away his present. You took away my land, you took away my troops, whatever. You're giving away your eternal future. And we're that future, so we're the pride.
Actually, Rabbi.
Just one second. Ben has his hand up over here. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say I wouldn't use the word that Rabbi Sacks is using because I think the only thing you can give away is what you own. If you're giving away something you don't own, you are stealing from somebody.
That's true. I agree.
So
Rabbi Sacks is not saying that if you steal from, he's not
No,
stealing.
I'm saying the only thing you can give away is what you own.
Yeah, but the only part of what you own that's really yours is what you're willing to give away. The other part that you're not willing to give away is the main point. That's not yours, even though you think it's yours. What you're not willing to give away is really not yours. That's his main point.
Now, it's not just now, it's forever. We're talking about time spans here. What's in the future? Forget about right now. Yes, you have to have it now to give it away now. But in the future, that's yours. Because whatever recognition or schar or whatever it was that you gave it away is what you merit. Nobody's going to think of you kindly because you got $1 billion in the bank when you died.
Which is a really good point, Isaac, that, the famous Psalm in Psalm 49, which talks about how, the money doesn't go with you. And so a person thinks he's got all these possessions and then he passes away and he really doesn't have. The possessions don't last. They're not with you. And so the idea of what's really yours, I think makes it much more easier to understand when you think about after a person dies, what does he really take with him? And the only thing he really takes with him is the mitzvahs that he did. And so those mitzvahs, they stay in his bank account of heaven, the heavenly bank account. And that's, so if you want to understand this concept of Rabbi Sacks, I think that really spells it out very clearly. That your real bank account is what Hashem has in your bank, and nothing can be stolen. And those are the good deeds that you've done. So going back to Rabbi Sacks's example, he brings an example of the tithings and the gifts that are given to the Kohen, and he mentions that after the smiting of the firstborn, one of the plagues, the final plague in Egypt. It says that the firstborn of the Jewish people became holy to Hashem. And
Rabbi.
Yes.
I just wanted to say something.
Yeah.
That whole idea that Rabbi Sacks is saying, it's a very beautiful thought about what you're giving away and what you own. But what if a prime minister of Israel in the last 50 years said, well, we're willing to give away Israel, and to show that we really own it, we're giving it away? That would be a big problem, right? That would be a major problem. Israel was given to the Jews. It wasn't given to us to give away. For us to give it away doesn't prove anything. That proves stupidity. So I'm just thinking of this in context of, modern times.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand what it means. You can't take it too literal. If someone, some guy comes to rob you and you says, oh, let me give you more because I'll really own it. I have more stuff in the back room. Let me get you more money because then I'll really own all my money. So let me go get it. Just wait 1 second and let me get you more money that you want to steal. I mean, you can't take it too literal. I'm willing to give this away. Look.
But Rebbe, if it was a schnubber at the door,
it's a different story.
The Hasidic Rebbe is doing just that. running around the house to see if there was maybe still the Shabbos candlestick they could give away.
Right.
And that's
Right. If it's a mitzvah, I just don't want anyone taking the wrong idea over here, and going to find, I'm willing to give this away or throw stuff in the garbage because look, I'm willing to give it away. Now it's really going to be mine. Now I'll really be rich, So don't take it too, out of context. But as Isaac says, there were, the idea of giving away your, from your own necessities, that's a huge proof that that's really yours. I mean, that's the greatest gift that you could really own is when you help a poor person, even with money that you risked your life to get and you worked hard to get, and you got through hardship and so on, and help someone else who's maybe might even be better off than you, but he's still struggling, and you can handle the struggle, and he's suffering from it, and you go and help him. That's a huge mitzvah. So,
Rabbi,
did someone say something?
Yes, it's Moshe. I just want to mention that one of the biggest things that Abraham Avinu gave away was his wife when it got back to Sarah Menu that Yitzchak had been sacrificed, which had not been the case. But it was the ram, obviously, said. But that was one of his biggest assets that he lost, was his wife. In the process of all this. But it was through the covenant between him and Hashem, it was a loss because he lost his wife. But
his son died on.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I thought initially you were talking about something else, that he gave his wife away.
I'm saying it's not in a material sense, but he lost. He lost a big part of himself through her passing.
Okay, yeah. So
because of the Akedah.
The Akedah, that's right.
I mean, we understand that she was meant to pass away, but that's the story of her passing was the Akedah, but not that she died before her time. You know what I mean?
Unless you have a based on the news, but it was based on the news that her son,
right,
Yitzhak, had been sacrificed, which
right. But I don't know if it says anywhere that she should have lived longer, and because of the news, you know what I mean, that caused her to die earlier. That we need to look up, see if the Medrash, any Medrash says anything like that. Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah, I believe the Medrash says that was her time, and
right.
The way we know that is because Isaac, when it was like 5 years before when she passed away that he started contemplating.
Meaning that was her natural time, right, that she was supposed to die. That's a good proof. That's a very good proof, Yehuda. Very nice proof. So what it seems, at least from my understanding, is that was the actual passing occurred through that means of her hearing that her son was going to be sacrificed, but not that she ended up dying before her time, and maybe there was some reason. I mean, that's at least my understanding, Moshe, or whoever was bringing up this idea. Okay, yes. So anyway, getting back to this, to Rabbi Sacks's insight here. So he says that the sacrificial system in Israel is hard to understand. Sacrifices made eminent sense in the pagan worldview, but the gods were the gods were capricious. They could strike at any time, bringing drought, famine, storms, floods, military defeat, or other disasters. And to avoid this, the ancients sought to propitiate them by bringing them offerings. Now,
Pay him off.
what is that?
Pay him off in advance.
Pay them off. Pay them off. Pay off those gods. That's what they thought. Now, the God of Israel, however, was not like that. He sought justice, not sacrifice, righteousness, not burnt offerings, structures of societal grace, not the elaborate rites of shrines. What then is the meaning of these offerings, of the first flocks and the herds and the harvests? And we even bring our firstborn sons to be redeemed. So what does it mean? What is this concept of sacrifice? So he says the Talmud contains a fascinating discussion of the logic of reciting blessings. And he says that Rabbi Yehuda says, in the name of Rav, that to enjoy anything of this world without making a blessing is like having personal use of things that were consecrated to God. As it says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And anyone that benefits from the world without making a blessing, without reciting a blessing, is really benefiting from God's holiness, because everything belongs to Hashem, and that's considered holy, considered holy for Hashem. It's Hashem's. And misusing holy items, as we learned in the morning class, is called me'ilah. You are benefiting from the holy items. It's called me'ilah. And so the Talmud says that whenever you take something without reciting a blessing, you're enjoying something without reciting a blessing, is considered benefiting. It's considered this sin of me'ilah. And then the Rabbi Levi says there's a contradiction. One verse says the earth was given to mankind, and the other verse says the earth is the Lord's. So how do you resolve this contradiction? So the Talmud says that before the blessing, it's considered God's. After the blessing, once you recite the blessing, then it becomes yours. It becomes the people's. So he says the world belongs to Hashem. Hashem owns it. He made it. And without Hashem, the world would cease to exist. So it comes out that what do we really own? The whole idea of ownership is not absolute. So what Rabbi Sacks is basically saying is everything that you thought until now is wrong. Because if you go back to the idea of creation and you think about it, the whole creation is limited, is subject, is dependent on Hashem's creating it every moment. And that means that really our whole existence is all relying on Hashem. We don't have absolute existence. And if we don't have absolute existence, then ownership is definitely not absolute either, because every item that we own is the same type of existence. So the whole world belongs to Hashem. That's what's absolute.
Okay.
But there's no concept of absolute human ownership. We are Hashem's guests on earth. So it really shakes up our whole, what we thought as a truth is not exactly as we thought, which is really a beautiful insight into our realization of what is absolute and what's real. Yes, Susan.
Okay, I understand what you're talking about, that the earth was created by Hashem and belongs to him, but he created humans and he created us with a mind and the ability to think. That ability, it belongs to me.
And who are you? Your existence is not even absolute.
But I'm not even real necessarily.
Right. So your ownership isn't too real either.
No.
And he didn't give it, he gave it to you to have free choice for you to choose
To
the
a
right
point,
thing.
a limited free choice. Limited. So to me, there's no such thing as ownership. I can't.
Now, don't go stealing because there's no such thing as ownership. Doesn't mean you can go around stealing now.
No, I'm not saying.
Because that
talking
person
about
doesn't
that.
really own what they have.
I'm not saying that about stealing. What I'm saying is that really none of us own really anything.
Right. We don't even own. In fact, one of the laws in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Law, is that you're not allowed to damage yourself. You're not allowed to hurt yourself. It's based on a verse in last week's Torah portion. And the Alter Rebbe, in his Shulchan Aruch, he gives a reason. He says the reason is, I think he's the only code of law that mentions the reason. He says, because even your body you do not own. It's really Hashem's.
Belongs to Hashem.
So you don't really own your body. So I think that really summarizes it all. Yes, Ben.
I want to say we don't really own anything, but what we get every year, it's really in zchut of something. So otherwise, even our sacrifices to God are not really ours. It's His.
Right. We're giving him back what's really his. That's a term used in the Talmud. But you have to keep in mind that there is a concept of ownership, but it's not the absolute ownership that we always think it is. There is a concept of ownership. There's a whole monetary section of the Code of Law. Yes, Ezra.
I'm still trying to look at this. And so we're saying before bracha is made, whatever it is consecrated. It's kodesh. And then after the bracha itself is the thing that releases the kodesh to become chulin for us to be able to use.
Correct. I think that might be the source that I wonder, it's very interesting that we know that when you recite a bracha on food, for example, so you're now refining it and elevating the spark to go back to heaven. So I'm wondering, I'm thinking maybe this is the source, that when you recite the bracha, so now it's no longer the holies, because you've separated the spark that can go to heaven, and the food now can nourish you. And maybe it's connected to that idea that you've now separated the spark from it. Just a thought. I don't know if I have to look into that a little more. I have, yes.
I just want to mention that Gashmiut we don't own, but Ruchnius, the spiritual, we do. I mean, whether it's good or bad, it's in our. It becomes absorbed into our neshama, and whether it will elevate us to a higher madrega is something that's another issue. You know what I'm saying? But Gashmiut is there to enhance the Ruchniut, That's why when we say a bracha over food, we say the bracha is because we elevate the food. Instead of just swallowing it and saying it's ours, for the take, we have to say a bracha in order to elevate the food,
Right. That's a good point Moshe is making, an interesting point about the spiritual, the spirituality is connected to our soul. So that really stays with the soul. All the physical things that are not really absolute. But the soul is part of God. It's interesting. That deserves to be developed further. But yeah, good point. Interesting point. So Rabbi Sacks here tells us that based on this Talmudic statement, and we're going to be learning it in the morning, God willing. This is the first page of the 6th chapter of Brachos. So. But that's where it mentions this contradiction of is the world God's or is it man's? And it says after the blessing, it's really ours. And it also says over there that it no longer has a prohibition of me'ilah, of misusing the temple property. And so if we recite a blessing, it's an act, which is an act of acknowledgement of Hashem's ownership. That's when we can now own it. In other words, by us acknowledging that it's really God's, if you take this idea further, that by you acknowledging that it's really God's, that's when it becomes ours. If we do not recite a blessing prior to enjoying the things of this world, it is as if we have made secular use of God's property. Once we have recited a blessing, so we have, as it were, redeemed the source of pleasure. We bought it back for private use by our offering of words. And once we symbolically give something back to Hashem, so he gives it back to us. The earth he has given to the children of man. So once we, so to speak, give it to him and acknowledge that's really his, and give him a blessing for it, or so we're sort of acknowledging that it's really his. That's when he actually gives it to us. And this is the idea of the offerings, first fruits, the firstborn animals. It is a symbolic renunciation of giving back to Hashem what we rightly acknowledge as his. And once we say that he's the owner of nature and of the land, then he empowers us to act as his trustee. Nowhere is this stated more clearly than regarding the laws of Shemitah, which is this year, Shemitah and Yovel, the Shemitah year. And that's the sabbatical year in Israel. And this is the year where they don't work on the lands. The religious farmers don't work the lands at all. And it's a big challenge, because they're not going to have their regular salary. They're not going to have. They don't work the lands. They don't plant. They're not harvesting like they normally do, and so on. And there are
sacrifice, isn't it, Rabbi? Isn't that a big sacrifice?
A huge sacrifice, and it's acknowledging that everything is really Hashem's. And there are inalienable conditions to Israelite residents in the land. Some of its produce must be shared with the poor. Slaves and debts must be released every 7 years. Every 50 years, land must return to its original owners. What this means is, and I don't like the term that he uses, but he calls it redistribution, periodic redistribution, that precisely because the free market does not ensure equality of outcomes. I don't know if all the concept is a very interesting concept, but I think some of these words have become political terms.
Yes.
In any event, he says the key word tzedakah does not mean charity or justice, but a combination of both. And it exists as a concept only because Judaism sees property not as ownership, but as guardianship. So what we give to the poor is not charity, but one of the conditions God makes to our possessing property at all, namely that we share some of what we have with others who have less. Hence the great verse. What is that?
Righteousness.
Righteousness.
But Rebbe, it does, and even if it's politically charged to some extent, it's true. In Israel, under Torah, equality of outcome is important in terms of the land. Everybody got their share and kept that share, and that's their share, and you can't get rid of it, and you can't take it away. It's your share forever. Now, what you do with your mind, or what you want to achieve, or what you want to do in business, off the land, go do whatever you want to do. You don't have, even I think in terms of Misa, there are issues. If it's not from the land, you have to give what you have to give. It's very complicated, but the land is definitely socialist and communist and equal outcome, not equal opportunity.
Well, there are scenarios where a person sells the land if he doesn't redeem it by a certain time, then and it goes to the it goes to the Kayanim and so on. So there's
rare. That's not a matter of normal commerce. That's rare, and rare. It's like saying,
but it's not communism. It's not communism.
It's like saying rape is an excuse for abortion. In terms of the numbers, that's rare.
So the and the other concept is that even though initially they had to keep to their families, to their tribes, but the girls, and after the first generation, the women married into other tribes, so the lands did end up being redistributed to different tribes, but it stayed in the family. So you're not what Rabbi Sacks is saying is not wrong.
Do the women have Yerusha?
Of course, there's Yerusha to women.
So,
So it
but it doesn't have anything to do with the shvatim. It has to do with the land and that person.
Right.
Well, we know that they do because of Benot Slofchad. The only caveat that there was that they had to marry within their tribes in order to keep the land in the tribe.
Yeah, but that was only the first generation. After that, it was free for all to marry within intertribal marriage was fine. After that generation, that was permitted on the Tu B'Av. After that was one of the permits that became after the first generation. So so the idea is. I see that does. I don't know if you want to use the term exactly like it's also not like redistribution, although it did get returned to the owners. But it's not the wealth; it's the land. The land was distributed to these families, and ultimately we all have a portion of it, an equal portion, as we started with, and it's internally connected to us, not because. See, I think the reason behind it is also important. It's not because this is the fair thing to do. I don't think that's the reason. See, communism is all about thinking that this is going to be fair, which is all nonsense because it was the least fairness was ever that ever was from communism. That's where you had the zero being fair. But the idea of the land of Eretz Yisrael, that everyone got their land, and even if you sold it, it could only be sold for 49 years, you had to get it back, had to do with the uniqueness of the land, that it's connected to every single yid, and that you are a part of it, but not that we want everyone to be equal. That I don't know if that's a you know what I mean, and like the reason behind it is not exactly is not really similar. It's not at all similar, I don't think. But in any event, the idea is that what you give is really what's real is what ends up, what really is makes it yours, and that we find with the Shemitah, giving it to Hashem, and acknowledging that the land is really Hashem's. Now, Rabbi Sacks continues, and he says there's a verse. The land must not be sold in perpetuity, because the land is mine. You are but aliens and my tenants. We are entitled to possess only that whose ownership we renounce. We truly own what we are willing to give away. That is the deeper meaning of Abraham's offer to Lot, where he says that if you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. That Hashem tells him the whole land will be his after he says that. And we only own what we are willing to share. So the idea, very interesting how he connects that to the Torah portion, and the idea is out there, and he connects it not only to the Torah portion but to the story of King Solomon, of the fact that, and then he connects it to all the tithings that we give to the Kohen, and the idea of Shemitah and so on, and the idea of blessings, that everything in the world, and he connects it to the concept of how the world is it's not an absolute existence. It's an existence that's totally dependent on Hashem, and ultimately It's really by us acknowledging that it's Hashem's, that's when we end up actually having some sense of ownership. It's when you acknowledge as really Hashem's, then all of a sudden, now you actually own a little. Yes, Ben.
I'm sorry, but I'm just not getting that concept.
Uh-huh.
It's like if the Shvatim owned the land, but they were not willing to give it away.
The idea is that they have the ideal way that they were supposed to live was every 7th year is Shemitah, right?
Yeah.
So they are giving that 7th year of produce potential of making their $100,000 or 200, whatever they would make in a year of produce. They're giving that to Hashem and saying, I'm not getting that.
They're giving it to Hashem, but they're not willing to give it to anybody else.
No. Think about in Hashem's terms. They're giving it to Hashem, okay. And Hashem says, now you own, I'm giving you the land, but you have to realize that it's really mine. I'm sort of temporarily giving it to you. And when you do that, when you keep Shemitah, what you're doing is saying, yes, Hashem, I know the land is really all yours. And you're being kind enough to give it to me for the other 6 years. By you giving up that 1 year, you're really saying, I know it's really fully yours. And and I'm trusting in you that I'll live through this year and I'll find some other sustenance. And even the other years, I understand is really a gift. Because if you're giving up a whole year, you're really saying, what you're saying is, I understand that it's really Hashem. When you give up the first of your produce, you're saying, I know the whole produce is really yours, Hashem. And so the idea is right there. When you do a blessing on food, you're saying that really this is all Hashem's. And and by reciting the bracha and acknowledging that, Hashem says, okay, now you could have. Now I'm letting you have some.
Now you have permission to eat it.
Permission to eat it.
Yeah.
So, but what it really does is shakes up our belief in what we own, and it really gives us this wake up call. We're not so absolute as we think, and our possessions are not as absolute as we think, and it's temporary. A lot of things that if people would only think this way, it would I think it would remove a lot of their anxiety and their anger when things don't go the way they would like them to go.
Ben?
Okay, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, Rabbi.
Yes, Ezra.
In answer to Ben said that he gives it to Hashem and not to anyone else. But when you declare when the Shemitah year comes into being, everyone has access to your land. So
that's a good point. Yes,
it's
not only that.
It's not that you say only to Hashem and not to anyone else. That's not true. I mean,
they are getting it. They are getting it from Hashem, not from you, because God told you in the Torah that they are allowed to take it. That they are allowed to take it during Shemitah.
But the same idea applies to charity. The same idea. That you're giving it to other people because Hashem tells us.
The whole thing, all of that's the same idea.
You're acknowledging that it's really Hashem's. And with that merit, Hashem blesses us with abundance because we are acknowledging that it's really His. And the same thing applies to our abilities, our strength, our understanding. When you think that it's your own knowledge and your own understanding, that's when we fail. Our success is when we acknowledge that it comes from Hashem. That's when Hashem can bless us with more success. We have to acknowledge that it really is all from Hashem. Yes, Moshe.
It should be deciphered from what we do in this country, where we have eminent domain and where people can take over land, squatters' rights, where they think that they own the land by squatting on it for any length of time, but eventually when they catch up with that person, it has to return back to the original owner, reverts back to the original owner. I mean, these are concepts of real estate, but with eminent domain, somebody can come in and say, look, we're going to put a bridge and your property is ours and we're going to take it over, So there are laws in this country that they will say that they'll take over somebody else's property and they own that property, you know. For example, if somebody
I'm going to leave.
If somebody has, for example, water, spring water on their land, and a railroad has to put tracks down over that land, they're going to say, your land is ours, you know, because this land belongs to the government, and we're going to take it over, and that's that. And then in the sense of communism, you know.
So wait, what do you?
You're not.
Just
you're
one
not
second,
returning
Moshe. You're
anything to
talking,
Hashem.
Moshe. You're losing everyone, at least me. Just what is your main point? Are you questioning Rabbi
The point I'm
Sacks'
trying to
insight
say
or
is
giving
it's
another
unlike-
example?
I'm trying to make it that it's unlike in Israel, the emblements. Everything belongs to Hashem. That they're giving it to the poor, but everything they're acknowledging the fact it belongs to Hashem. Unlike communism and the laws of real estate in this country, where somebody can take over something and say it belongs to the state or whatever, you know what I'm saying, which is a similar concept, but they won't.
Today in
classify it as being.
Today in Israel, the Keren Kayemet owns most of the land.
Interesting.
Not the government, the Keren Kayemet.
But in any event, we're really talking about the biblical connection of everyone with the land of Israel, not the modern state of Israel.
I was just trying to make a crude point with regards to that.
Okay. But I understand you wanted to connect.
Yes, but the base of the Mikdash, if the Kahanim needed something or whatever, I am sure they were able to exercise eminent domain over the parcels that were around the Mikdash. And in terms of a day-to-day practical matter, whether or not anybody would really fight with them, we can all say, no, they were all holy and they all gave it up. But I'm sure there were disputes in the hallways over things that were going back and forth. And there were times when the Kahanim probably had to do something or take something for public use. Or Shem Shemayim. It's not public use, but.
So is that in connection with Moshe's statement?
When he says eminent domain, I'm saying there is always the concept that there is a boss that is higher than yours. Now, in the case of eminent domain, if the state needs it, it has needs that are above the individual. And for just compensation, they have to pay you fair money. Nobody takes anything from you. They have to pay you the reasonable value of it. That's all.
Right. Okay, good point. So I think that touches upon what you were saying, Moshe, but very interesting. And I think this was a very interesting insight of Rabbi Sacks, and we have to rethink all of our, the way we see things. And we shouldn't be as selfish. If we think about this properly, we won't look at things as much as it is ours as really it's Hashem's. Everything is really Hashem's. So we should be able to use it for the thing that Hashem, use everything that we have for whatever Hashem wants us to use it for. We should merit that it should go to good use. We should be able to fulfill whatever Hashem's desire is. And have a wonderful enjoy it. That's right. With menucha, with gesund and menucha, with good health and pleasantness. Have a wonderful evening. I'll see you tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Stay safe, everybody.